Hello again, and welcome to In Taiwan We Speak, your audio guide to Taiwan's mind-blowing linguistic diversity. I am Alexander Shin, and this is the last part of our conversation about the Siraya language with Jolan Hsieh, or Babarich Dagalomai, a Siraya indigenous rights advocate and a professor at the Department of Ethnic Relations and Cultures at the National Donghua University in Hualien. Professor Hsieh, I've had this story happen to me once. I was doing a research about indigenous language education, and one of the indigenous activists I interviewed said a very interesting thing. He said that if indigenous languages in Taiwan in general are in the emergency room of a hospital, then Plains indigenous languages are DNR, do not resuscitate. Yet, when we look at Siraya language, I think it's a very beautiful case of how it is literally being resuscitated. What is this movement now that is happening around the Siraya language specifically and its revitalization? When did it start and how is it going?
I would say that over 20 years ago, people began to, because we have that movement, right? And then we always facing that the indigenous or recognize the indigenous say, oh yeah, you look like indigenous. Do you speak your own languages? I'm like, not really. And so they will say, oh, no, you are not indigenous, right? That only happened when they refer to Pingpu people like us. If they ask Amis or any other indigenous people, they already have a government status. And if you say, oh, I don't speak our own language, which is a very common case. And then there's, oh, poor thing, because the government do not provide enough funding for you to learn, that is not your fault. So you can see that is double standards, right? So we begin to feel like, okay, so we want to push for the government to recognize us, from our social movement, and we are part of indigenous. We needed to work hard to do language revitalization and then to have a culture practice and then to have a cultural revitalization all the same time all together to fit our status, So when Dutch people came to Taiwan to do business trade, that's the first encounter of people in Taiwan is the Siraya people. So they trade deer skin. They do some of the jewelry trade. So that is how we learn from each other. And then, indigenous people normally without written language. So for the gospel purpose, Dutch people try to teach indigenous people about Christianity. And so they want to make indigenous people or Siraya people to understand the gospel, the Bible's message. So they recorded that into Book of Matthew, Book of Mark. So that turned out to be one of a very important source for us to do language revitalizations because that is earliest written language in Taiwan, and we call it Xingang language. And that is based on our Siraya language. And then the Dutch people do that for the gospel purpose and to translate that into Bible. So fortunately, because of this, like I said about Dutch, trying to do their missionary and to educate, quote unquote, our people, they have that the Bible, biblical source, live there. And then we read, like myself, read so many different cases. They say, language never die, right? And it's just no people to use it. If you can find resources and to find right people and to get a group of people to use them, you will be able to have that language to walk into your normal life again, to your day-to-day life again. So we have some people begin to do dictionary. We have group of scholars to read the whole true book of Matthew and Mark and all those things, and to analyze the work. And then I think, fortunately, because that is Bible, and Bible is like a all wide, word known, and it's so easy to identify. our Siraya language, and then according to this book, and then what is the biblical word about this meaning, and then to Mandarin Chinese. So we have Dutch, and then Siraya language, and then English, and then Mandarin. 4 different languages they are together. And then I think a group of people, they also make that into a computer ad. So we be able to say, for example, I want to know how to say a good day. Then I can put Mandarin Chinese to say 早安. And then they will come up with Siraya language, Mariang, Wagi. So that is something we try to revitalize our language. And like I said, because we have that book of, biblical resources, be able to identify back.
And how many books are there?
3.
3.
I mean, like books of Matthew and Mark, and then I'm not so sure about John, but it's all those, the Gospels books. And then there's one. So with that, then they have one dictionary, big one. And then after that, because of Tainan, we all live in Tainan area, and then Tainan city, and then the county before promoting that we are the local indigenous peoples. So our local language, we teach Siraya language. So we needed to come up with like a contemporary teaching resources, textbook, audio recording, and then for people who want to learn Siraya language, they have like a material to learn.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. If the language is being revitalized based on biblical sources, very few sources, that means that vocabulary is going to be limited.
So that is very common in all indigenous language, right? So for example, in Taiwan, in Iran, they are clear language. Yes, you adopt so many Japanese words. So there's all different time area that you don't have that kind of a thing in that time frame. For example, you don't have a computer, right? So you have to invent some word and you adopt something from foreign languages. And so that is the same thing. Even though that is limited in biblical resources, those sources is good enough because you have pretty much covered so many things. But if that is belong to the more contemporary world or the new technologies or the new thought, then you can create that. That is being used by many different indigenous languages as well. So, for example, I know very well in Maori language, waka, meaning boat. Then when they want to use airplane, how do you say that? Boat.
A sky boat?
Yeah. So it's like a langi waka or waka langi. So it's a sky and boat. So that's the same thing. So they don't really adopt foreign word, but they make up from their own thing. And then I think in Taiwan, we use Japanese word a lot because we have a long period of time of being colonized by Japan, and then they are very powerful in terms of to teach their language. And that also was the time to come up with so many different things. So anyway, for that in Taiwan, what your question is about how we can use that in the 20th century, I don't think that is a problem at all. And for example, I published a book about transdiscipline research. So I ask teachers or professors from those linguistics, and then they know how to do Eastern Formosa language, and they just say, hey, if I want to do this in my book title, what is equivalent term? So we come up with like a common knowledge, a cross knowledge, or base knowledge, and then we come up with our own Siraya language to refer to transdiscipline research knowledge.
As part of the general Siraya language revitalization efforts, you also personally are learning Siraya, right?
Yes, I do. So I just get those resources, the book and then material and the audio recording from Tainan City. So they always provided it to me, and also like I said in the computer language, because when people ask me some of the words, whether or not I know how to say in Siraya, and I will always go back to check and to see, oh, that is this, and we might be able to combine with that. So recently, I also trying to write poetry. I think for the speaking language, it's a good. I always do the intro myself and then to say where I come from. I belong to this community, and then I work in a Donghua University. But at the same time, I think I want to put some written word and then to more like a poetry to reflect to my own identity with my Siraya language. So that's a new thing I'm learning. And so basically, I'm from like a more social political movement activist. And to combine with, my identity through the language and then the culture. So I also do ceremonial practice. And I also try to learn our traditional art to do things. So I want to make myself a more comprehensive Siraya woman. Be able to do fight for the fight, leading the movement. And also I want to be able to express myself, my identity well with my language and with my culture.
With these beautifully put words, that is all the time we have for today, talking about the Siraya language with Professor Jolan Hsieh, an indigenous rights advocate and scholar. Thank you so much, Professor Hsieh, for being here throughout these 3 episodes and for this very insightful conversation.
Thank you, Maku Alilik.
And dear listeners, thank you for being with us. If you've enjoyed our series about the Siraya language and its speaking community, then please give us some boost on social media and don't forget to recommend this program to your friends. And of course, do come back next Tuesday for another one of Taiwan's fascinating languages. This was In Taiwan We Speak, and I was Oleg. See you next week.